Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Looks like another rain day is in the forecast for us. I think we are all ready for the rain to be gone, but here we are. So I wanted to this week just kind of open this up to an open forum, and also the fact that I do know everybody got all those forms, and I kind of want to break that down. I was talking with Randy a little bit yesterday, and I want to break those forms down so they're more understandable. We don't need to go through all 140 pages of those forms. So I'm going to break this down for you guys just in the buyer's representation and the purchase agreement today. And then we're gonna basically open it up for questions and get an open forum. So I'm going to screen share real quick with you guys. We're going to go over the buyer rep. We're going to go over the purchase agreement with those changes that are highlighted. And then we're going to open it up for some questions. I see Matt is on here this morning. So thank you, Matt, for attending. I know there's been several lender questions. And so that's why I basically said, like, Matt, you are a go-to person, and I need you to get on the Zoom and answer some questions because I don't want to be a lender, and I'm going to stay in my lane. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to screen share so we can bop through this quick. Can everybody see my screen with the buyer rep? Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we are going to just kind of walk through this a little bit. Again, if there's any questions, let's save it to the end, and then we will go from there. So this is a buyer representation agreement. This is an exclusive agreement. We're not going to walk through the other ones because this one is the most common. So basically, obviously you put the date in the top, you put your buyer's information, your broker is going to be National Realty Guild in there. And then you have to put, a start and stop date that is mandatory in this agreement. So basically what I'm doing is if I spoke to somebody today and I got this agreement signed, I'm going to put today's date in there. And then I'm putting in there 12/31 of 2024. That's just what I'm doing. I did forget to put the disclaimer out to you guys. Anything that we are saying today on the Zoom huddle is just basically me saying this is how I do my business. I'm not telling you guys what you should or should not put in there. That is up to you as real estate agents and negotiating with your clients. So this is just basically what I'm doing with my buyers and my listings. So today's date, I'm extending everything out till December 31st, 2024. And then we walk down here to lines 27. And basically what I'm putting in here is buyer agrees to pay broker a retainer fee. I'm not doing a retainer at this point, so I just leave that blank. But the next one says buyer shall pay broker or broker's compensation blank percentage or selling price. You put in the dollar amount. I am putting in there what is kind of normal for my area. So I am putting in, 2.7% because that's kind of a little bit high for my area. But remember what I said in this line right here, you can't ever raise that up. So if you want to put 3% in there, you have to talk to your buyers about, this is, if I'm representing you, I'm expecting to get paid that 3%, and we're going to have to negotiate and see what the sellers are offering on their listing. But let's say, for instance, they do 2.5. Am I going to be okay with 2.5? I'm probably not going to go back after that buyer for that 0.5%. That's just my opinion. I don't do things like that. I want referrals, you guys. So it's treating your clients right. But again, we're not working for free. So just be comfortable in what you put in here. But remember what I said, you can't ever raise it, but you can lower it. So, if you put 3%, if you put 2.7, put that in there or put a dollar amount. I'm always doing 180 days in here for B. And then walking through this 39, any compensation accepted by a broker from the seller or broker's representative or assisting seller shall or shall not reduce the obligation to the buyer to pay the compensation. So that's completely up to you which box you want to check on this. But you know, again, I'm saying shall. That's completely up to you what you would like to do. They do have it highlighted here in buyer representation. Broker may not receive compensation for broker services provided to the buyer from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to this contract. So exactly what I said up here, it can't exceed this amount. So please make sure that you are explaining this. And then we basically go down here to, you know, commercial, farm, recreational, residential, check the box that's fitting for them. And then I'm explaining to the buyers, do you want me to help you find a title company to work with, or do you want to find your own title company or attorney, whatever you would like? Most of the time, you know, they're not working with title companies day to day. So they're like, yep, I'm going to have you help me. So you do buyer directs broker to arrange qualified closing agent, and you have them sign it. But that is how I explain it. Most of the stuff is, you guys know, foreign investments, and then agency representation here, going over the dual agency. I do say to my clients on the listing side, 95% of the time, I'm not bringing you a buyer. So this is why, we're offering that compensation to the buyer's agent. Going over that, but going over what dual agency means. We should be going over this again in our agency form. In this form, we go over it again in the purchase agreement. Evidently, we need to continue to keep talking about dual agency and making sure people understand it. So we walk down here. I do put in this other section, you guys, I charge that broker admin fee to come back to my buyers or my sellers. So in this section, I am putting $5.95 broker admin fee to be paid by buyer at closing. Again, I'm walking through that with them, and I'm explaining to them what that broker admin fee is, why my broker charges it, and they understand it. So if they come back at closing and say that's on the ALTA statement, I can say, yep, remember we went over it. It's on line 129 of your buyer rep agreement. So everybody wants to get signed here. And then obviously there would be I'm just going off of the forms that are here. There would be that wire fraud disclosure. But again, this is the only big change on this buyer representation agreement. And again, it's just highlighting 45 and 46. So very important to get this filled out. Randy, anything you want to add on that buyer rep before we move on to the PA?
I think the only thing is the key here is that this form has been around forever and it's evolved, and you got a lot of questions last week. I'm not sure why, but if you scroll back down to 45 and 46, that's the only difference. So I don't know why there would be a ton of questions about price fixing or what to do, because we're not really doing anything different than what we did. All the changes is that this line says you're not going to get paid from outside sources if it's not agreed on in this paperwork. And so I don't know how there could be a series of questions, but maybe we'll figure out why when we open up for Q&A.
Perfect. Let's just do this on the buyer rep. So is there any questions from anybody? Let's just open it up with this buyer rep. And we'll take a little bit of time with that. If it goes too much, then I'm going to have to cut people off and we're going to have to extend into that PA. Is there any questions or concerns that anybody has about explaining this buyer representation to your clients?
They have to be coming from the rule change. And so that's why it's odd that all the speculations there and all the questions are coming, because again, that's the only difference, 45 and 46. In other states where they haven't had an agreement, there should be more questions, but Minnesota's always had an agreement.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On line 30, the broker compensation, I always put 2.7% there, and we can't charge more than that. Is there going to be any pushback from anywhere that says that we can't negotiate after that? Because if If the listing agent is only offering 1% and you know that my VA buyer can only afford 0.5% more, now I go 1.5%, this says 2.7. Am I going to have a problem with that, charging them less? Because I'm going to have to negotiate it at some point. Do you know what I mean, Randy?
Yeah, I think I'm almost there, but like in that scenario, it's like you're assuming the co-op's only gonna be 1%, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, okay, the listing agent's going to say, well, we're only paying 1%. And then we've got to negotiate the rest of it, and it's got to go way below that 2.7%. I don't
Well,
think
if it's
there would
part
be
of
a
the purchase
problem.
agreement on the next one, right?
Okay, yeah,
And then it becomes part of the transaction that they're gonna pay the difference. The seller's gonna pay the difference of what they allowed the listing agent to pay as a co-op. So now that they know that the listing agent's co-op isn't acceptable to the buyer or the buyer's agent, you're gonna add it into the purchase agreement for the difference,
okay.
right?
Yeah, if they can afford it. If they can only afford a 0.5%, I'm only going to charge them 1.5.
But I think what you're saying is that 0.5% is out of the VA buyer's pocket over and
Right.
above the co-op, right?
Yes.
So when you put it on the purchase agreement on the next, when we look at that in a second, it's no longer coming out of the buyer's pocket. It comes out of the seller's proceeds again. So it just, that's there to put the seller back on the spot that says, well, the buyer has to cover this fee and we don't have a deal right now.
All
So
right, that
it
makes
needs to
sense.
come out of seller's proceeds.
All right,
If your
makes
buyer
sense.
authorizes you to put that on that purchase agreement, then it should come out of the seller's proceeds. So I think we should look at it and possibly table it for after we go over the PA.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Perfect. Any other questions about the buyer representation contract? Okay, we're gonna move on to the purchase agreement then. So basically what I did with this is, again, this is the copy that everybody got, so we're just gonna kind of skim through, but we're gonna go over that highlighted area. So obviously date, buyer's name, earnest money, you're gonna want to put in here, trust funds, or however you're doing that. You know, the address should pre-fill with the legal description from the MLS. You're putting your purchase price in here. If it's cash, financing, contract for deed, closing date. We're going to move on. Obviously, we've got the mortgage section that you guys know about, so you can go in and fill that out. So in here, this is Randy, a couple of things, I guess they have this highlighted 93 and 97. I think it's just because they added that verbiage in there. Is that correct?
Well, did you say you need to speak about it because it was added?
Yeah, yep. So just because
Well,
it's highlighted on here, yeah.
We're pointing out a form change. And so if you're gonna point out that this changed on the form, I mean, yeah, but you know, this probably just clears up some of the back and forth information. Most people don't read these lines, and then there's questions about it. And so they're clearly saying that if, you know, the written statement was delivered and then it does not close on the date for any reason related to financing, then the money's forfeited to the seller, you know, in the next line, that the buyer and seller sign the cancellation, and then it directs the money to the seller for damages. So I think possibly I could go back to the old PA, but it might have had another option for you to choose buyer or seller. Otherwise, they're just clarifying what that line was. I could maybe go look at it while you're doing this and see why it's there.
Okay. So make sure you're checking the box, obviously, which one pertains, you know, retained by seller, retained by buyer. You know, that's pretty important. Again, when you send these in for compliance, they're getting checked, but just double check that you're doing that. Lender commitment work orders, you know, that's a big one too, if you haven't filled in this, and who's paying for that. FHA escape clause obviously has to be filled in. And then here, it looks like there was a line 143, there was a highlighted not otherwise waived is what they added to that section. So again, a little bit of verbiage that's on the VA funding side. Seller contributions, you would put that in here, the inspection.
Can you scroll back up quick
Oh.
briefly to 99, 97?
Yep,
All they did is put this in bold and capitals.
okay. So something came up where they had to change it.
I think they had to explain it several times to legal hotline questions. So we can come back to it if needed.
Okay, perfect. Okay, obviously we've got the sale of the buyer's property down here. We've got the real estate tax and special assessment that you need to walk through. And then we've got 233 and 234 of the date of the purchase agreement, notwithstanding the foregoing, buyer shall assume any levied assessments that cannot be paid in the year of closing.
That line wasn't there before at all. So they're just saying, they used to just say all other special assessments. So they're allowing it to be negotiated if they happen in the year that the property closes, because that's when taxes are due. But if it's gonna happen in another year, they're just saying the buyer's obviously gonna assume future levies. And so they clarified it by adding that sentence.
Okay, that makes sense. Obviously you've got your warranty deeds, all of that stuff that you would check here. Possession, going through all of that. Let's see here. Obviously this box was actually added last year. I know that the disclosure alternatives are the disclosure statement. So that had changed last year. Then we go over the city water, city sewer, private well, septic, all of that information. We've got the home protection warranty there. We've got the agent and agency notice here. And this is where we come to line 405 through 408 that has been added to the purchase agreement. So basically, seller contributes to the buyer's broker compensation. Seller agrees to pay buyer's broker compensation at closing, blank percentage of the sale or dollar amount, whichever is addition to any seller's contribution to the buyer's closing costs paid at closing. This amount is in addition to the listing broker's offer of compensation, if any. So, Randy, let's walk through this again. If you can explain this to everybody so they clearly understand it.
Yeah, because I think that this will clarify Mike's question, and it should clarify a whole bunch of other questions. And really, it's kind of these if-then scenarios, right? So I was like, well, what if they don't co-op? Well, this is where we're able to satisfy that, right? The fact is, one, you have a buyer's agreement to pay you. If the buyer doesn't have the cash, then it has to come out of the proceeds of the sale. And so basically it comes down to, if the seller can't agree to pay the extra amount, and this is assuming that the seller's not even offering anything. But that means, that's just when they offer the agent the ability to offer a co-op. And so some argumentative seller decides, hey, we're not going to allow the agent to do that. Well, now you can write it into here. It becomes part of the purchase agreement and part of the seller's proceeds. So it'll be on the seller statement, just like it was before. I mean, if somebody wanted to, they could write, 2.5 here, and then they could actually write in line 408, just add, it doesn't make sense, but you could add, now the seller doesn't have to let the listing broker pay the co-op because it's all covered in here. The problem is we can't really do that, because the reason that it says this amount is in addition to listing broker's offer of compensation is because a buyer's agent's not supposed to try to negotiate with the seller the amount that the seller agreed to let the listing agent offer as a co-op. That's part of the articles of the Code of Ethics. So buyer's agents can't go renegotiate listing agreements. I hope you guys kind of understand that, because that's the crossover that they have to dance around the Code of Ethics to be able to come up with this ability to let us offer let us ask for the seller to pay fees on the purchase agreement. I hope that that's kind of clear because it's a little confusing. We went around on this a few months back that you can't go and renegotiate the amount of the co-op, which means that you're renegotiating the amount of the listing agreement to pay you. So since we don't have the ability to call into or look at the MLS anymore, and let's just say you're out there and you have to write an offer and you never found out if you're getting a co-op, which I would think that by the time you have the offer written, you're probably going to have found out somewhere, possibly by calling the listing agent's front desk or tracking down a listing agent, which the attorneys know that that's going to be tough too, because a lot of them aren't answering the phone. So that's why we got to come up with this alternative database. But in the event that you didn't know, you could start this off with, hey, buyer, the amount that you have in your agreement is 2.7. Say right now, there's nowhere for me to find out what they're going to offer. So this will all come to light here when they rewrite the offer, and then it'll just be renegotiated. So if they say, oh, no, we're offering a co-op of 1.5, well, then this line will just change. It'll be something you strike and change to, the 1.2 or the whatever the difference would be. I think that's the only way to go into it blindly, and it starts to become a negotiation piece. So
Mike,
there's one form that I was going to look at to see if it's going to go away, and it's the disclosure of how much buyer's commission was being paid out, because now it's probably going to be obvious somewhere, but I don't think that they eliminated it. So we've always disclosed the amount of commissions, and the only change here is that you can't find it in the MLS. And so this lets you write in and cover any differences if there isn't any, and start to talk, to open the conversation about, is there any? I hope that clarifies. But if not, Mike, you asked a question. A lot of people aren't asking questions. And so the thing is here, if nobody asks these questions, then we can't go deeper into them and give everybody a further understanding of what's really happening here. So I don't say any questions.
I got one quick question. So did we ever decide if we could put the commission, if we wanted to offer one as the listing agent, in the agent's remarks on the MLS, or is that?
No, can't be hidden in the MLS in any way.
Okay, all right, thanks.
It could be put on a sign outside.
Oh, really? Okay.
We can't put it in the MLS. It's the only thing. And it goes a little further than that. We can't put it in. No broker or recipient of MLS data can just put other people's brokers' offer of compensation on automatically populated MLS data. So that's what makes it a little more complicated of how each brokerage is going to let everybody know what it is. So I could go on National Realty Guild, and if the company that gives us our feed sets it up so we can quickly have like a banner that goes across the first listing or something, a page for agents to look at, and then we can go type in the co-op amount, that's fine. The problem is there's not letting us take all the feeds from all the other brokers and type something in for them either. So it's like if you had a showing day set up with 7 different brokerages, houses, you have to look at each brokerage's website or call each brokerage's listing agent. Right now, that's our hassle. And if you don't want to do that, just start by putting it out in the open on line 405 to 408 on the PA, and then they'll get negotiated away.
Randy, just a quick question. Do you see this affecting the compensation disclosure at all? Do you think that that's going to be a problem then?
Okay, so that's kind of what I was saying. Like, in a way, the compensation disclosure could go away, but it can't, because the co-op part has to be on there, right? And so I was actually gonna call Jill and have her pull one up, but the only thing I could see is more disclosure coming, so that form could go away, but I guess that is our disclosure form.
the one question, Randy, we did have is there is this new form that just came out. This whole entire thing was part of that packet of 140 some pages.
There it is. Okay, so this
this is new, and I did get this pulled up because I wanted to see if we had time to walk through this. This is, a brand new, the whole entire form, but I I think, and again, Randy, you can clarify this. I think this has to be signed by the brokers, not,
Yes, I didn't, I was told that this form was still being, developed. And so, yeah, the attorney on the phone a couple days ago gave me the wrong information. So this is the form that we could get in, so that you guys, remember how we said in the MLS, when it was posted, the MLS and then the Board of Realtors would defend us if anybody tried to, get around, trying to pay. So we had an agent the other day, the listing agent sold their house, and actually this listing agent changed the MLS to 0 and tried to not pay one of our agents. And I called their broker and he said immediately, no, the MLS has clear rules. The agent showed the house and the commission was on there and he has to pay. So he paid, and so in that scenario, we could rely on the MLS history data. So we're thinking, now this can't be posted in the MLS, this form, it can't be an attachment. But this is the form that if you guys got into an agreement, this will make sure that you get paid at closing. But the attorney also said if a representative of a brokerage had sent you an email that said that you're going to get paid, that's in form of writing also. But they made this specifically so that this is to protect us like our MLS used to.
Couple questions in the chat here, Randy. Can we put a sign in the yard with the seller's permission that we are paying a buyer's agent compensation? I think you already answered that. That was a yes.
Yeah, nobody has said that that's against any rule.
Okay. Can I put in agent remarks that the seller believes that both sides of the party benefit from both sides of the party having representation?
Wait, maybe I need to see that or turn up my speaker.
That one I don't, Dennis, you might need to clarify on that one. I don't understand.
I can't see the chat.
So just, if I ask my seller, go through the whole everything, explaining, how they benefit from both sides of the party having representation, they agree to paying representation. Wouldn't it be beneficial for me to put in remarks that my seller believes that both sides of the party benefit from both sides of the party having representation? It's indirectly saying, we're paying a commission, but I'm not stating that.
I'd have to ask because all I know is that we can't put like somehow coded into remarks what we're paying. And so like what you're saying is we're not telling everybody what we're paying. We're saying we're paying.
Well, I'm not saying we're paying. They just believe that in both sides having representation, but we are paying.
We support all buyers agents.
Yeah, I don't see why that's even illegal, but I would rather buy the legal hotline because you're just saying a general comment, but we definitely can't somehow have it say Mars 2 Uranus whatever.
Sorry.
It can't be coded in there somehow what we're paying. I mean, it's kind of a good blanket statement question, but one of the things that they're going to say is, if people are trying to find ways to tell people what we're going to get paid, then the rule could be challenged in the future. And so that's just something that I think the attorney would probably stand on the side of caution with, but I don't see anything that clearly says it's illegal, or violates the rule. None of this is legal or illegal. It's just rules of conduct with the MLS.
I think the one that I had seen is like an agent was saying like, I'm going to put in there that 2.7 car garage is acceptable by the buyer's agent. Like that wording, it's like, don't set yourself up that way. Just
that's obviously prohibited.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just understanding this, what's allowed and what's not. So I get it. That's why we have so many questions that we kept trying to say, we're going to wait for factual information before we dive into this, or we can talk in circles for hours and hours. And now we have it. We know what our set of rules are given to us, and we just have to play with them and make this happen.
Jill and Randy, I was going to say, I believe the number, we have some mortgage rules like this too, but I think the number is what they're mainly concerned with. So you were just saying some code of 2.7 or some code of 1.5 or some code of 1. if there's anything number related, that's that's explicitly prohibited. But I would be curious too. Those are great questions as far as like if you put, like you said, we could consult the legal hotline, but if you put we support buyers agents, from everything that I understand, and I'm not an attorney, I would assume that would be okay unless they think that's just too coded as well, because it's not a number reference, it's very vague, but that's a great question because I
Well, the
wonder if
bigger
that,
part of that even makes me wonder if we can tell everybody in the remarks where they can find the information. So for any co-op information, go to our listing company's website. And that'll be for our agents. As long as we can put something like that, then I know the other statement, obviously, we can put. And I don't see why we can't actually, because we're not telling them what it is in the MLS. That's why I believe when NAR settled, they just felt that, yeah, we can't easily find the information, but there's multiple ways to skin a cat. And now we added some language and we found our way to how to navigate through with the new rule. So remember, like these other states, probably about, I think almost half of the states never had mandatory buyer rep agreements. And we've just been using them here for a decade or more. So that's why there's only one line on it that changed. I don't think it even changed. It changed and said that this is all we can get paid and we'll get paid. No secret money coming from anywhere. So if it's on that agreement in Minnesota here, that's all we're getting. I think the only thing is people have to explain how this works now, because you can't just rely on the MLS to pay the co-op and close on the deal without talking about it. But that happened again. So when we go back and look at the history of these form changes, every form's here at 824 in the bottom left. This one was updated. There's another form. I got the purchase agreement in front of me that was 823. They've always been evolving. And so if you go look at well, every year they do this and they show us what's new. And this year is obviously a bigger deal with more questions, but Minnesota, it's really, really the only obstacle is you can't see it in the MLS.
I was actually on a call the other day with a bunch of agents, all across the nation, and we were saying, and I pulled up and I also pulled up our buyer rep, and a lot of them were very surprised because their states have not been using this, and it's almost like they're behind that 8 ball where we've been in front of it, which I'm actually kind of grateful for. Because they're scrambling, worse than what we are. These aren't minor. They have a whole new form to go over. So I do appreciate that. Is there any specific questions in reference to the purchase agreement? Otherwise, I know we have some questions for Matt. So I want to open it up to purchase agreement questions right now. Does anybody have any? Okay. So Matt, there is a few questions in reference to, let's just say for instance, that the seller is not going to pay anything to the buyer's agent in here. So in this, if we put 2.5%, can we on the price of this obviously do like what we do with seller concessions and up the price to offset those things? Can you go into details about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I was just gonna say, so the normal way of doing it, so what we've kind of been used to listed in the MLS, seller pays the buyer's agent. It's kind of assumed the co-op is in there. You guys see it and everyone basically is on the same page. If that happens, nothing changes, which we kind of already know that, but it's just a general blanket statement. That'll still happen a lot of the time. You're going to find out in a different way because, as Randy said, it won't be as obvious on the MLS, but by calling or brokerage websites or whatnot, you're going to be able to figure out who's offering what as far as a co-op. And then in that case, business as usual, nothing really changes, nothing on the financing or mortgage side would be different, you're all good to go. So the main concerns, that I hear are what Jill said, where, okay, what if the seller's not offering anything, or what if they're offering one and I want two, and my buyer can't come up with the one, or there's a gap there. So yeah, one of the major ways would be to do just what Jill said, is to just like close, and this is the way that I guess I view the NAR settlement in general, is just like closing costs. So I have a borrower I pre-approved last week. They have $20,000 in the bank. The loan that we're working on for their approval amount and loan type, they need about $20,000 for their down payment. It's right, it's within $1,000. So they have no money for closing costs, to cover closing costs. Closing costs in their loan are, let's say, $10,000 we were talking about. So if they get their offer accepted, they'll need, whatever home they're looking at, they'll need to get $10,000 from the seller, because they can't get a gift. They don't have 401k that they can pull from. It's literally just they have the money for down payment to meet the minimum required for them. So they would need to get the $10,000 from the seller. So if it's a home where the seller is not willing to pay closing costs, or there's competition and other offers do not have that closing cost ask in there, then they're probably not going to get that house, of course, right? So that's the way that I kind of look at it with NAR, is that in those scenarios, if I'm working with an agent, what we'll do sometimes is either they'll say it's a $300,000 house. They'll either say, we'll offer 300,000, but we want 3% back in closing costs, so $9,000. If the seller isn't willing to do that just straight up, then we could potentially say, okay, well, not me, but the agent in that case is saying, okay, well, we'll offer you 309 with 3% back in closing costs. So then you're still netting 300. You're getting the same thing, but then now my buyer gets 3% for closing costs. We're all good. The deal can close. The only thing in that scenario, of course, as you all know, is that the home has to appraise at 309. Otherwise, we're kind of back in the same boat. So it kind of goes into like, what does the value look like? Do we have a little bit of wiggle room? Will it appraise for a little bit higher? But you can definitely increase for regular closing costs or for NAR. Now the way that everything gets paid out, I think that's some of the parts that we don't know, and Randy is figuring out, and Jill is talking with you guys about, as far as like, if it's in there that the seller, let's say it's 2.5%, seller to pay 2.5%, you guys have it on the PA as the seller paying it, and then you just bump the purchase price by 2.5%, the way that Jill said it. That is perfectly fine, because that's the same thing we can do with closing costs. Just the home has to appraise at the new, purchase price plus 2.5%, but that can be built in. And then now their purchase is based off of that higher purchase price, down payment percentage is based off that higher purchase price, all of those things. So it's basically built into the purchase price, not necessarily rolled in the loan, which would be a distinction. It is, but for technical purposes, it's more built into the purchase price. So they're just paying 2.5% more for the home to cover your buyer, your buyer agent commission. It's not that their loan is bigger, their actual purchase is 2.5% bigger. But yeah, that's the way that we get around a lot of the closing cost stuff for, years and years. That's how we've kind of done it. One of the other, well, I guess that's one of the main ways. I guess we can open up to maybe any questions on that specifically, just since it's, since that's kind of its own topic by itself.
Well, see, now what you're saying is nothing new. It's just,
No.
it's just being discussed now more.
Yeah,
Because somebody has to argue about trying to get out of paying fees. Like I said,
Yeah.
if the seller doesn't want to pay, then they have to try to, put their foot in the mouth. And it's just, before it was co-op agreed to up front, and we believe there's going to be a lot of co-oping happening still. So in the instance that a seller, it's counseling for a seller that's not going to agree. So it's just, I think, a lot more counseling and letting people know. That's why I said, if I was going on a listing appointment, and somebody argued about this co-op. I think Jill's been on over a dozen in the last couple of months and nobody's brought it up. So, but if somehow it becomes part of the conversation, then, I just point out that purchase agreement and say, well, if we don't offer it now, the agents need to pay their representative, and it's always rolled into transactions for decades and decades. And so here's how they're gonna have for you to roll it in. So let's just add it today and not play games here, right?
And I think the hope is that, certainly my hope on the mortgage side, I know this isn't 100% reality. And me and Jill have talked about this in some of the last couple of calls, that the hope would be that, whatever the percentage is, let's say it's 90%, maybe that's being optimistic, or maybe it's 80%, or maybe it's 95%, but that that a listing agent would still act basically the same that you guys have always done. So if it's, 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, the higher the number, the better, for everybody, really, would be that if they just treat it as normal, like, yes, there's this, we disclose a little bit different, it's discussed a little bit different, but in the end, the seller is going to pay for the buyer's agent because they have to get paid. And a lot of the home buyers on the buy side, I mean, some can come up with the difference, but there's a lot that can't. So if it's just business as usual, then everybody's okay. Nothing really changes. It's just discussed and disclosed slightly different. But what everybody is worried about is the whatever percentage that we don't know. And this is the part that's hard, because it's basically human behavior. Are the sellers reading stuff in the media and news, and they want to get greedy because they think they don't have to pay, or is a listing agent, setting up a value proposition for their clients to say, hey, we don't do that over here. We don't pay buyer's agents. So it's going to make, you're going to make more money, or you're going to, whatever spin they're giving to their client. So if they're going sort of rogue, let's say, from the way that you guys have always kind of done it, hopefully that number is small. And again, hopefully we're not just, me and Jill aren't just being optimistic and our heads in the clouds. But if if 9 out of 10 are the same, then you guys won't see much of a difference. And then it's that 1 of 10 that, then we have to figure a workaround. Maybe we increase the purchase price to kind of roll it into the purchase. Maybe the buyer brings, 0.5%, and whatever the structure is, I don't know. And that's all going to be transaction by transaction. But the hope would be that listing agents and sellers, understand, because they're buyers at different points too. And it's not just a one-sided transaction. If you offer no buyer's agent commission, or 0.5% or 1% or less than what you guys are accustomed to, up around 2.7 and 3, well then, if I'm a seller, I don't necessarily want that either, because if I'm offering 1% and the other 8 homes that are like mine are offering 2.7, am I going to get screwed now? Is the listing agent telling me, well, I'm really going to save 1.7% on commission, but am I going to lose out on percentage points from multiple parties being, interested, that maybe won't be interested now because their buyer's agent aren't going to bring them to my house, because me and my listing agent are lowballing the buyer's agent. So does my home kind of get blackballed? So do I even want to have a discounted, do I even not as a seller, do I want to not offer anything to a buyer's agent, or even offer less than market? Because then I'm less competitive on my sale. That's the way that I would look at it if I'm a seller. And I know that not everybody will, of course, and that's sort of the thing we don't know, is this is human behavior. It's like me trying to predict how my son is going to act at the zoo on Saturday. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes he's crazy. He's almost 3 years old, so I have no idea. And I don't know how listing agents are going to act in full, or sellers. But the more that business as usual, obviously that's good for everybody. And then I think there will be more too, that this is all brand new. None of it's even fully all, they'll be probably through the end of the year, things will still be changing. So there may be things, on the mortgage side or on the real estate side, that we figure out, or new things that come into place, kind of like the stuff we're talking about with MLS. Like, well, can we say this to kind of say this, but not really say this? I think there's going to be a lot of things like that make make it easier. So if it's 8 out of 10 transactions are normal and then 2 we're scrambling on, or we have to figure out a different way, I think there'll be more and more solutions that are different than what we've done in the past, but still, doable. And then there's going to be some that maybe the seller is just a hard line. They're not offering any buyer's agent commission. They're not willing to increase the purchase price to risk maybe an appraisal coming in low, and then that home is just not going to be the fit for your buyer. I mean, that happens nowadays too without there's chances that a home couldn't go through for many reasons. I mean, you guys deal with that all the time. It doesn't just because a transaction isn't accepted, or we have to go on to the next house, that doesn't mean that the next house is going to fall through. I mean, that one might have a full buyer's agent co-op built in, and then it's a blessing in disguise. So I think there'll be options and workarounds, but I think mostly, without fully knowing the behavior of listing agents and sellers, hopefully everything stays close to the same. So then the ones that you guys do have to do sort of the workaround stuff is fewer and farther between.
So let's look at Mike Hammersky. And then all of a sudden I got the same listing from about 4 agents from Open Door, right? And Open Door is offering a 0 co-op recently. So we have to figure out, I mean, that's a scenario that's pretty harsh. And they're also saying that they'll offer up to 1.5 and some closing costs, or however the buyer wants to utilize that. But if Open Door, all of a sudden receives multiple offers, and they've got 3 offers and they're all for X price, and then the seller looks at their net, I could see that that's where, I don't know what the ethics are then for a listing. If a listing agent doesn't have the ability or authorization from the seller to pay anything in that scenario, I mean, Open Door is doing what they're doing right now, and then they're trying to negotiate the commission back in. But it's like anybody, if they have a net now, and I suppose the one that has commissions in there is going to be a higher net for the seller, that's the only time we're going to run into some problems here. And we're just going to have to run into them to find out what people are doing to work around them. Because, all of a sudden you increase it by 3 points and it doesn't appraise, there's going to be some issues. And I know that that's everybody's concern, but we're just going to have to get there first. I had to pull up this compensation disclosure just because of the fact that this one was added in 2019. I know that we had, it was more of a thing to protect the agents, because probably when these lawsuit things started up again, because everybody's like, how much are these guys making and who's paying them and all these things. And this just clarified at the end of the transaction how much the seller or owner paid, or how much their broker paid them, so that they knew how much a selling agent got paid on a transaction. But the disclosure has been there for some time also, especially it's always been on, settlement statements, if you get to see your side of the settlement statement. But I don't know how far we want to kick the can on like what would happen if somebody came and the seller said no, because we could do it all afternoon. Right. But I appreciate the clarification.
I think the biggest thing is that our industry, we have to problem solve every day. There are situations that come up. We are in a very high when we get an offer accepted and we're so excited about it, but then we can go to a low if we go through inspection and something falls apart. Like Matt had said, an appraisal can fall apart. Things we are not guaranteed until they are in that closing room and they are signing on the dotted line, and then it's like, woo, we made it to the closing day. Like, thank goodness. But we can get on these really high highs, but we can be low lows too. What I will tell you guys is this compensation disclosure is actually in a lot of other brokerages, this is a required document. I know at Energy we don't have this as a required document, but I've been filling this out nonstop since the beginning of me doing this, because of the fact that I put in here already, I checked the box that, I'm going to get 2.5 from the seller. And then down here, what I do on the buyer side is I check the box down here and I put $5.95 broker admin fee. And again, it's because I'm explaining and I'm educating my clients, and this is a backup onto a backup of them understanding what we're doing and what's being disclosed. But I point out to them, like, this is being paid by the seller, but this is that broker admin fee that we had talked about. So I do think this form is important, just to, you know, again, educate, go over it. I am a person who does not skip through forms. I walk through it with clients and I let them know, like, hey, I'm going to need some time on Zoom, or I'm going to have to sit down and we're going to have to walk through these, and I'm going to need your full attention to do that. One thing, Matt, if you could do me a favor, can you throw your contact into the chat? Because I have a lot of agents that are asking me for your contact because they like your problem solving skills, which is great. Let's move over to the chat. I'm going to stop screen sharing because we got about 10 minutes. Is there any questions, concerns, comments about what we went over today? Anything that you have for Randy or Matt? Let's go over it in the next 10 minutes since we've got time.
Yeah, or I'll just post my phone number too, so you guys can ask me directly instead of Jill, because Jill's just gonna ask me.
One thing, Jill, too, I was gonna touch on, well, two things quick as you guys are, if you're formulating any questions. Another thing that I thought of recently as far as NAR goes is one option that we've always had on the lender side is we can potentially, this is not going to help in a ton of situations, but just again, trying to be optimistic and throwing out problem solving things, is that we can potentially give the buyer a higher interest rate to increase their credit that they would get for that rate. So they would get, basically it's like me creating same thing as a seller credit, but maybe I can hike their interest rate up a little bit, give them a $5,000 credit, which could potentially pay you as the buyer's agent. Now there's some gymnastics there because that's with disclosures and what's legal. That's not exactly how it would work, but in theory, if I can save them $5,000 on one side, and then we can write into an agreement that they pay you on another, essentially from how a buyer thinks about their money, it's essentially the same. So there are some, now how many buyers are actually going to take, all I hear all day, every day is interest rates need to be lower. So I don't think there's that many that would love to, especially in this environment, that would love to hike their rate. But if that's their only avenue to get the home, people fall in love with the home, not the mortgage. So if they really want the home and you need to get paid and I need to hike up the rate to pay you, to make up the difference, that's an option. Probably not going to be super popular with borrowers, but it's an option. The other thing I was going to mention, shameless plug on here, is that as a mortgage broker, so when you work, I have the graph up for me. I can send this to Jill to send out too. I've referenced this in the past, but when you work with a mortgage broker like myself, statistically, on average, we save them $9,400 on a loan versus the average Joe lender that you guys would work with. So there's still, in our country, 3 out of every 4 loans are done by a bank, big mortgage company, a non-broker, and about 26% now market share is done by brokers. So 1 in 4 loans. So still the vast majority of the business is done by non-brokers. And on those loans, these aren't my numbers, this is statistically, buyers are paying $9,400 more. Now that's, part of that is upfront, part of that is in the interest rate and longer term, but at least $1,500 of that is upfront. And I'd say in a lot of cases when I'm competing with other lenders, it's more like $2,000 or $3,000 I've seen. So when you work with a broker like myself, and I work for Edge Home Finance in Minnetonka, we save borrowers money. So if we have to get creative on finding money from sources to pay buyers agents, it's beneficial working with a broker because we have more meat on the bone of saving money over here to potentially help pay you guys over here. So that's an advantage of working with a broker. Someone like me, also just lower rates. We're smarter, we're more educated. There's other things that I could go into, but usually we're more industry veterans if we're a broker because we're not just force-fed loans through a bank. But there's lots of reasons to work with a broker, but just related specifically to buyer commissions, like we save borrowers money and that can help us get creative. Also, it just helps in general if we're talking about building money into a purchase price, and anytime you can save the borrower money, if we're trying to find thousands of dollars to pay buyers agents, if we're saving them thousands on this end, then we have more tools in the tool belt. And then I talked recently about, we have a 0% down program. I mean, as a broker, there's lots of different options too that the banks don't necessarily have access to. So the more that I can reduce their down payment, again, same theory applies, that if I can get them into 0% down, based on their income level, then potentially that frees up money that they might have had saved for their down payment, which could now go to pay you if needed. So more options is always better. And that's the biggest thing that I would usually preach as a broker, is we have options. And hopefully some of those options then can help if we had to get into a situation where we had to creatively pay you as a buyer's agent. Was there any questions that popped up, Jill, that you can see, or?
There was just a title recommendation, so I
Okay.
did put that in there, title company. Mike, does anyone think we will see a lot of DIY buyers, self-representation videos, companies, listing agents, handouts, etc.? That was.
And I mean, I still think, like, I've been a broker for 8 years, and I know that sometimes, a lot of the times, the buyers will communicate with you guys as agents first. That's the way the process typically works. They want the house. You guys are kind of the gatekeepers to see the house, and they usually talk to you before they talk to me. But I do get into the situations where, if it's friends, family, past clients, or just they get to social media, whatever, they get to me first. I've always been a big preacher of the work that you guys do as realtors to talk you guys up and help buyers up. Because a lot of buyers, and I've bought homes in my life, like, man, it would be sweet if I could save X% and just represent myself on one side or the other. But they don't understand the value that, well, a lot of people do understand, but there's some that don't understand the value that you guys truly bring on the buying and the listing side. Now, traditionally, they haven't really had to pay for you on the buy side, so they didn't really think about it. But, I think it's important too that, like you said, Mike, do it yourself videos. I think I'm certainly going to do more marketing myself as far as pumping you guys up to say, like, hey, this is why realtors are important. This is how they help you. They help you negotiate. They help you get a better deal. They help you save money. They help you make more money on a listing. Just the things that we've all seen, iPhone camera pictures on listings, and things that are different than the realtor that rolls out the red carpet and has drone footage. And I mean, there's a vast difference in the quality of an agent. I think that, to Mike's point, I do think, just because of this in the media and things, there are going to be people that get caught up, like, yeah, I could do what a realtor does, and I could, save an extra 3%. But as we all know, it's like, yeah, I mean, I could try to build a house, but that doesn't mean it's gonna work out very well for me. So hopefully, I think a lot of this goes down to, like, Jill and me and Jill have kind of preached this, but I think most of this is probably, we're planning for the 10 or 15% of things that could go wrong. Hopefully the 85% is just sort of as we're used to things being. So yeah, there's going to be rogue buyers, there's going to be rogue listing agents. And then, just like Jill said, to me, that's no different than an appraisal coming in low or an inspection coming up with items. Like, you guys don't have perfect transactions all the time anyways, and sometimes those fall through, and then it's the next property that we get. I don't think this will be much different. Like, if the seller or listing agent is not cooperating, no pun intended, then on to the next, and hopefully the next one will. I think all of these will be solvable. It's just, is it going to be smooth sailing with every single house? No, but it's not that way, currently either.
There is a really interesting, and I'm working on a reel for it. If you guys don't know, you see me on social media, and I do lots of reels and things. One thing that is funny, because I am creating a reel around it, is the stack of paperwork that it takes for us as real estate agents, which we know that paperwork very, very well. But to throw it in front of just normal people and go, well, yeah, here, fill it out, have fun, because they don't know it every day, and that's the value that we bring. It's the same thing that I'm telling you guys about my conversations that I'm having with my listings, the conversation that I have, and I really get down to the heartfelt things to this. These properties matter to people. And what I'm winning with is saying to them, it's like saying, don't put an FHA on there. Like, oh, I don't want to accept FHA. You just limited your buyer pool down. So for me, I'm like, you know what? Think about like your first time buying a house. How did that make you feel? So we should probably give people opportunities on the FHA and the VA side to get into home ownership, because that made you feel really, really good to be able to own a home. That's the American dream. So let's help people get into that. So again, it's kind of balancing and playing off of those things that really meant important to them when they bought their first house. So educate them and help them understand what it means for other people to get in the home. And at the end of the day, it's about selling houses. That's what we do. So it's about getting it to the end of the road. There is a couple questions in there. Where do you get your energy forms from? Sweet Assist. Randy put on there, obviously, North Star MLS forms area.
But Jill, does
Yeah.
that have the NRG logo? That's what I want.
It should have the energy logo because that actually pulls from the MLS.
Oh, so if I
yeah.
go in the North Star MLS and I get
Mhm.
the forms, it'll automatically have the NRG logo on there.
Yep, that's
Well,
where like, your association puts that. They pull all of that.
The realtor forms have the logo, but there might be some North Star MLS forms that don't.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to see them on there because anytime I do like a disclosure or I'm doing anything, that energy's popped up at the top.
Yeah, once you add them to your transaction or whatever, you'll see the NRG logo. You don't see it when you're looking for it, but once it's in your stack, then it's there.
Okay.
Michelle had a question about the listing contract.
Well, yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'd say I believe they can change it. It's not even really posted anywhere publicly for the most part.
Yep, before when the MLS had it in there, the agent is entitled to the amount that they were shown when they showed the property. If it went down, if it went up, the agent could get more. But the agents, when they showed a property, the seller's agent couldn't lower it on them. They'd be entitled to what they got when they showed the property. But now they'll just have to call the listing broker and find out what they're offering and get it in writing if they want.
And make sure that you guys do like either like an MLS change form with that on there, or make sure you get something signed by the seller on that end and make sure it's documented if you do any changes along that way. I will also say this, and I know we're out of time, but what I will say on that whole DIY thing, if they don't want to list it with you and they say they want to do it themselves, remember that you can also do a facilitator agreement with these people. Janelle Lake does a ton of facilitator agreements. She is great at it, but again, she's in a different area. She's up north, and there's just a lot of people that she knows that are, buying and selling, and they already have somebody, but she's facilitating that document for them and getting paid for it. So talk to Janelle if you have any questions on it. But I don't know how many she's done this year. It's crazy. I've never seen somebody do so many facilitator agreements, but it's awesome. So okay, well, we are out of time for today, you guys. Next week, we are going to go into some marketing as far as what you need to be doing at marketing and what needs to be there. We're going to walk through that. If there's any other questions, we can definitely open that up again and go over a listing contract. But definitely, if you have broker questions, I need you to reach out to Randy. Reach out to Randy directly. He will answer those broker questions. So definitely do that. If you have any admin questions, please reach out to Francis or Jeremy, and they can help you with that. I hope everybody got their CE done, and we can check that off the list. So anything else, please make sure you're reaching out to that admin and they can help. And then we can go from there. But otherwise, you guys, business as normal. Go out there, do something great, and put some joy into the world.
Jill,
Yeah.
Jill, just want to let everybody know that March Weir is having a brokers open today from 11 to 1. And it's in
Okay.
Missouri. So if anybody can make it, that'd be great.
What's the address on that one, Grace?
That one's 8653 Seasons Parkway. And that's right near the Tamarack Village. You know, the shopping center. It's nearby there.
And you did the open house for her over the weekend, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Did it go well?
It's multi-levels. So
Okay.
it's surprisingly it attracts a lot of older people like 60, 55 plus. And for all those multi-levels, they really don't like it. So we're having a hard time finding buyers.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we'd like to get some input on how, you know, Marge can increase traffic or just get a purchase, you know, agreement wrote up. I mean, you know, an offer. So,
Perfect. Well,
anyways,
pop by if you can. Go see Grace, and I'm assuming Marge is going to be there today too.
yeah, I hope so.
Okay.
If not, I'll be there. And I have my old Keller Williams sign up, so don't
What?
for you. Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't spent the money to get NRG signs, but they say Keller Williams. But anyways, just
Go
look for
spend
the
some money, Grace. Jill,
Yeah.
Matt, Randy, thank you very much for your time and all the great information. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
We have a
Absolutely.
warehouse full of signs that's not compliant.
Oh, it's
Yes,
not
I might-
compliant?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, Grace. Reach out to Jeremy or Francis, and they will help you get some signs. Because yeah, you don't want to have your broker that's not your broker. Not a good
Not,
thing.
not good.
Grace, I was gonna say, one thing that I've seen some agents do in the past, just since I'm connected on the lending side, is that if a property is sitting, one incentive I've seen them offer is building in language about the buy down programs that we have on the mortgage side. So a seller can say, hey, we'll offer a 1.0 rate buy down, which means we buy down the rate by 1%. The seller is paying for it and funding it. But if I'm a buyer, the rate will be bought down by 1% in year one. Or there's a 2-1 buy down where they're bought down by 2% in year one and 1% in year two. So this is obviously very geeky stuff. Text me if you have questions. But I've seen listings do that where they'll offer a 2-1 buy down. It costs the seller on a lot of homes, you know, median price in Minnesota, it's probably a $9,000 cost to the seller. So it's like seller paid essentially for them, but they'll advertise it within the listing to say like, hey, free 2-1 buy down for your clients, which means like right now that buyer would get like the market rate right now, average interest rate is probably, let's say around 6.99. So imagine a buyer walking into that property and they can get 4.99 for year one and 5.99 for year two, which is one of the bigger obstacles right now for a buyer buying is it's all we hear about, you know, is higher interest rates. So that might not be necessary on day one on a listing, but if a home is sitting, you know, offering a 2-1 buy down where their seller funds it, you know, can be very traffic driving. If you think about a 4.99 rate now the home becomes a lot more attractive. So that's something to keep in mind too, that I've seen other agents use.
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, you guys, Randy did put in the chat as well too, about maybe changing that start time. I'm going to send out a survey just to everybody so we can kind of gauge it because we've got a mixed bag here. But we'll get that sent out and see what works better for everybody and kind of go from there. But perfect. All right,
Have a good day.
Matt, thank you for your time. Randy, thank you for your time. Go out there, do something amazing, you guys. We'll chat soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks everyone.